I'd love to welcome Biplab Sarkar. I'd love to welcome you, former CEO of Vectorworks. I'm so pleased to have you on my podcast. I'm so looking forward to hearing what you've got to tell me, because there's a couple of topics I think would be lovely to hear from you. I'd love to know, what was your career before Vectorworks? I remember when you joined, and I'd love to know what you brought to Vectorworks from that. And maybe later on we can look at what changes you made while you were in Vectorworks. So please tell us about your career before Vectorworks.
Sure. I came to the United States in 86. So prior to that, for 2 years, I was working for a Tata Motor Company. I was in the assembly line for trucks. And because I was trained as a mechanical engineer, I got my bachelor's in mechanical engineering. And then I came for my master's and PhD at Ohio State here. And then I started working. But initially, all my work was in the mechanical engineering realm, mechanical CAD, MCAD. So first company that I joined was a company owned by Volkswagen called ISM Systems. And we were doing knobs, surface modeling for Volkswagen car doors and fenders and that kind of thing. Then I started working for Intergraph, where we started working on a Windows-based mechanical CAD package called Solid Edge, which is still around. I worked there for 3 releases, and then I left and joined Computer Vision at that time. And Computer Vision was coming up with a similar Windows-based competitor for SolidWorks, and that was called Design Wave. And I started working there as the manager of geometry and rendering. And then that Computer Vision got acquired by PTC. So I became a PTC employee. But then the product became Pro Desktop. And they could not really sell the product because they had so many internal products which are competition to Pro Desktop. So I started working on the Pro Desktop, but with the Granite engine that PTC had, which is basically the kernel of Pro Engineers, but didn't quite enjoy it. And so I started looking out. And also, I think there was a socioeconomic factor. We could not afford anything in Boston at the time in terms of housing. Could not buy a home for my family. So my daughter was born in 98. And so we moved here to Maryland in 2000 and joined Vectorworks. And that's in short, my career before. So it was mostly mechanical CAD development prior to joining Vectorworks. So Vectorworks was the first product that I knew, which is in the architecture world, that I started working.
So you brought a lot of those skills with you to Vectorworks. Did you start somewhere in the middle, or did you start at the top? I can't remember.
No, I started working as a geometry and rendering manager. So I took over the geometry team. In those days, you remember, nothing used to work properly, like the add surface, all those things were finicky. The add solid, the intersect solid, subtract solid also. In general, we were trying to put in Euler mechanism, which is basically Kevin Euler's thesis in RPI. And then we were trying to see whether that works. But the implementation was ours. So it was not quite done well. And so people used to do all kinds of things. They'll move two things that are failing to add. They'll move it by a slight distance, 0.001 inches or something like that, and then it will work. So it was really a very, unreliable package at that time. And of course, many of the other functionality was dependent on this basic functionality. And so they had to hire someone who was in that field. And so I was in that field. I came there and we started using Solids Plus, or SMLib at that time it used to be called. And that was better, but not really that reliable either. You probably remember is that we had a little bit of fiasco with the Vectorworks 9 release, where we were trying to convert from integer to floating point. And that was the biggest project. And then we were trying to do some of the context sensitive menus and stuff like that. But it failed because it was that there was nothing, that the reliability was gone down even more. And so that's when I started putting in my stuff, which is, you probably remember, 952, which is the 3D Power Pack.
I remember 3D Power Pack, yeah.
That was the first set of functionality that I would say it was just me, because there was nobody else. It was me and helping me was Steve Johnson, who was creating the tool interfaces that where I could put the filleting and the chamfering and those kind of shelling and those kind of functionality in there, and all the different surface modeling. Basically, I was trying to put in all the functionality that was there in FormZ and Rhino at that time. And it was all the surface modeling functionality from Rhino and some of the solid modeling functionality from FormZ, and to remove the gaps between Vectorworks fundamentals and those two products. And so that's how it started. And then it just slowly we got into a situation where basically we had to say whether, well, is SMLib or Solids++, is this our future? And obviously the answer that came back from everybody that was using the product was, it's not good enough. So that's when we started looking into other kernels. And of course, so we went with Parasolid.
Yeah, I remember the change to Parasolid, and the big thing, and when I was teaching Vectorworks at that time, and I'd say to people, it's like the same car with a different engine. It's just a more powerful, more reliable engine, but it looks the same. The car looks the same.
Yes, it does. And it took us, I would say, 1.5 to 2 years, but it was worth it because the reliability just went up so much, and the performance. I think many of these operations used to take a huge amount of time, and with Parasolid and the Solids++, one of the biggest things it had was a very bad memory management. Whereas Parasolid was low on memory, and it could just fly. Yes. So lots of different things that we could do, especially on the architectural side, that required Boolean operations or trimming operation or shelling operation. We could do them just like that in real time, whereas that was not possible in the prior modeler. So I think it took us 2 years to do the basics of Vectorworks, and then another 2 years to put it everywhere else, like in all our particle products, in Architect, Landmark, and Spotlight. So that's how we went about doing that thing.
I mean, listening to you talk, I think a lot of us don't realize how much work is going on behind the background. We get the wall tool and we go, why doesn't it draw? Why doesn't it do this? Come on, just make it work. But we don't realize that it takes you 4 years to implement that new kernel across all of those different things. It's just, now I hear you say it, I start to think, oh, we should have been so much nicer to you guys, because you were obviously working so hard to get that to happen for us.
Yeah, you were. That was you asked me one of the questions, that what brought you to Vectorworks. I think the biggest thing that brought me to Vectorworks was I realized after talking to Rich Deal at that time, and he used to call me up once in 3 months, hey, what are you doing? Are you coming to Vectorworks or not? And his thing was that we need a person like you who has the knowledge of geometric kernels and the rendering methodologies, and you will be, once you come here, you can make your mark because it's a smaller company. I was working for Intergraphs and PTCs. These are huge companies. So I think that was one of the attractions. The other attraction was, of course, my ideas would be accepted more compared to these other companies that I used to work for. So all of those, I think, it just became something that I thought that, okay, I could go there and be that go-to person for at least geometry and rendering. And that's how I came. And then I, like what you were saying, I saw that there was so much, there was like huge amount of technical debt, as we call it, meaning that it has fallen behind compared to where the software development should be. And for example, I joined in 2000, then 2008, we did the Parasolid conversion. But in between that, we did viewports and also started doing 2D, 3D integration. You remember the old days where the 2D objects were floating on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of these are all technical debts, because I think initial Vectorworks developers, they just took the easy way out. And they thought that, okay, we can just put this thing very easily and everything will be fine. But they didn't realize that in another 5 years or 8 years, people are not going to look at just 2D. They're also going to look at 3D. And the coordinate system were not unified. There was no Unicode. There was no support for other languages. There was no support for 64-bit. There was no support for any good, basically, rendering engine or cloud services based on cloud. What would you do? So we had to really up until 2017, almost, I would say, we did a lot of these changes in the core of Vectorworks that made it compatible to many, or made it basically look up and say, okay, now we can do whatever we need, whatever we need, and use all the latest technologies that we can. And so it was a huge technical debt that we had to serve, and of course, in doing so, that we had to increase the team, and we started doing a lot of other things. For example, we had a team in Sofia, we had a team in the US, and so there was a lot of, what should I say, exchange of ideas, and that helped us quite a bit.
I liken it to the development of an old house. Here, there's
Yes.
an old house, and it got left into disrepair. It was built in the 1800s, and no one looked after it for 50 years. And so the guy that renovated it, he spent $1 million doing the foundations, and he spent $1 million redoing the windows, and he spent another $1 million doing the roof. And all he's really done is it's still the same house. It hasn't got pretty paint yet. It hasn't got any of the good stuff, but it's got good foundations. And I guess I see that it's similar to that you spent all this time building the foundations of a product that can then take you into the future, but you've got to do all that work. And meanwhile, people like me are outside going, but it doesn't work quicker, work faster. You're falling behind.
Yeah. Yeah, it is true. We were falling behind. I think we caught up a little bit, at least. I'll give you a simple example. The OpenGL, we used to have a render OpenGL, that kind of menu. Imagine now we can actually be on that OpenGL mode or whatever, using our new graphics engine. And it doesn't happen overnight. You have to make sure that all your geometries are optimized and you're using the GPU of the platform that you're using. So it's a lot of work in the back end that people don't really see. But yes, ultimately it helps you in achieving, or basically our thing is to become a modern product. That's what we were striving at, basically.
And a lot of my podcasts have been about, with Ethan, have been about building information modeling.
Yes.
And one of the things I've said to people is that information is one of the biggest things about building information modeling. But Vectorworks has always had such a huge ability to attach information to objects. I taught ArchiCAD for 7 years, and it's not as easy to grab an object and say, I want to stick this information on it. Whereas Vectorworks has always had that ability.
Yeah. Yeah. Right from the beginning, as we had the records, and we could use the records for lots of different things. And then, of course, we now have the data manager, which even allows you to do lots of different things in a much more streamlined way, I would say, and may make you many complex things that you can do, like actually based on criteria, and you can actually change the IFC data also. So there's a lot of things that has gone layer by layer. And then Vectorworks, I would say that what we have been very successful in doing is that trying to create these generalized systems that will work on not only just Vectorworks data, but on other data that is attached to it. And so we always looked at the problems at a more, just zooming out a little bit, and not just solve the problem for that particular issue or anything like that, but more generalized. And I think that has really served us way better than we used to do in the past. So I think it's got a nice foundation now. I'm very happy with that. And more I see cloud services. Even in this 2026 release, I see a lot of cloud services that are going in, and we added Python in addition to the vector script. So that's a bit of modernization there. And then, of course, we had the Marionette, and it's just a platform, I would say, that people can use for doing a lot of different things. And I wish, and maybe that's where I consider a little bit of failure, that we started, and as we have now a good, what should I say, partner program, and there's a lot of them mentioned in the partner program page and stuff like that. But it took us a long time to get to that. So I would have been happier if we could have done we would have an ecosystem like what Rhino has, for example. Rhino has a fantastic ecosystem. You cannot compare that to anyone else. But I think Vectorworks needs to up its game there and encourage more and more people to participate in that partner program.
You've made so many changes to Vectorworks. Some of the ones I was really pleased with. I think Marionette was a massive change. the Python, but made possible because you brought Python in as a
Yeah.
program language. I think the other thing was that even the vector script, which is, I guess you could call that it's an
Yeah.
old program language, but ChatGPT knows how to program in vector script and you can ask it to make stuff for you. And
Mhm.
so having that scripting available easily always made it easy for me to make extra tools.
Yeah.
And Julian Carr was really good. He taught me how to program in VectorScript, and he
Yeah.
taught me how to think about the program to change my thoughts about that. And that meant that I could build my very first tool, which I kept with me up until you got viewports. And to me, viewports were a massive change,
Oh,
and they
yeah.
were to me one of the modernized features of Vectorworks.
Yeah. So
But I
that was after 3D Power Pack. That was my next big thing, which was viewports and section viewports. That's a change because we didn't have a sectioning tool. We had something, but it was all 2D based, and viewports and section viewports. And then after that, we went into Parasolid. And then, of course, everything kind of opened up for us. And so we could do a lot of different things with that foundation.
if I asked you, what's your biggest success from your time at Vectorworks?
There are these technical wins that we had, but I was thinking about that question before we started talking because it's such an important one for me. And for me, the biggest thing is two things that I was able to do. I could put together a team structure inside Vectorworks that really is very forward looking and it could work on innovations for years to come. And that I was very good at that. And Sean Flaherty, who was before me, he recognized that and he said, this guy is good at putting together teams, then maybe he should become the CEO. So that's how it just happened. But so I'm very proud of that we created a team, very streamlined, not a lot of different divisions between the team. There's an architectural features team, there's a landmark features team, there's spotlight team, core team, there's QA, there's the publications, all of those teams are all, well managed, 6 to 7 people. They're all reporting to one of the directors, and the directors are reporting to the vice presidents, and the vice presidents are reporting to the CPO or CTO or whatever. So all of that structure, if you remember in the old days, there was no structure.
No, Richard was in charge, and
Yeah, there was just Deal Grafsoft, Richard Deal or Sean maybe at the time. And then everybody else was just software engineers. There was nothing to look forward to, I would say, that, hey, so I'm a software engineer. Yes, my salary is increasing every year, but there was nothing forward looking. And so I think we brought that more. I think Mark Farnan was the director with me, and both of us, we worked on that, okay, we'll have engineers, or senior engineers, principal engineers, all those kind of things we put together. And then that really became the blueprint for the organization going forward. So that was one thing that I was really proud of, along with all the, what should I say, the workflow efficiencies that we gained out of that. Also, we massively improved the processes. As you probably have seen, we have the Jira's processes, the Parforce for our source code, and all of those things were not there. So as we improved our code, we needed tools that are equally competent for that purpose. So I think we made a massive gain there. In general, the processes, the tasks, the task overview documents, the approval process, the whole intranet where we used to track how the task is moving from one phase to another and ultimately getting released. And all of those processes were very streamlined. And at any point of time, we can see, okay, what are the tasks that are ready to be released? And so these are things that were not there in the past. So I'm very proud of being part of all of those things. And then lastly, I would say is the culture that after I became the CTO in 2008 and then 2016 becoming the CEO, I could change the culture and the way people used to work. And really, I feel it was like the openness and the collaborative culture that I was able to bring together. I don't know whether you heard this interview from Autodesk CEO Carl Bass, and he was saying like the companies are described as great, good, and important. So he says great companies are defined as financially great, and then the good companies are defined as their values and the culture and how they treat their customers, their employees. and how they treat the communities at large. And then important companies that make real difference in the world. And I feel we were able to do, we were doing, Vectorworks is always financially doing very well. In the eyes of Nemetschek, we were one of the very successful brands. So that was good. But the other thing that was lacking was that good the employee feeling and the culture of the company, the values that defined by the one of the things, for example, I brought was to this idea of we have the VTOs now, volunteer time off. So you can take 2 years, I think a week off every year and just volunteer in organizations that you love to volunteer. Here in Maryland, we go to the Meals on Wheels or Maryland Food Bank or places like that where we just volunteer. And it's also a team building. 14 or 15 of us are all together working with them, things like that. I think it brings people together. And all of those things, I think, are really, at the end of the day, it makes a difference. And I feel that's the value that I could bring to this particular company at the time. And so I think I feel good that we ultimately have a fantastic culture over there, and people are really open and collaborative, and they want to do something good for the community around as well as for the greater good, I would say. So it's good from that point of view.
When I wrote that question, what's your biggest success? I was thinking of Marionette. I was thinking of these small things. I didn't realize, of course, the biggest success, and you're quite right, the biggest success is that you've changed the whole structure of and the culture of the company. And one of the things I see has changed. We now have the public roadmap, whereas before we never knew what was coming out. Now we know what's coming out. So there's obviously some private stuff that you're discussing that's not public yet, but that idea of starting with the end in mind, we now know where we're going. We can now start to plan for that. It's just been fantastic. And I've really enjoyed, I've been with Vectorworks. I've never been employed by you, but I've been teaching and doing my thing with Vectorworks for more than 30 years now. And it's been wonderful to watch Vectorworks get more and more powerful as we go along. And every year I get excited about doing my what's new in Vectorworks and showing the people that I'm in touch with what's new. So it's been, but I've got to say, Biplab, I really appreciate your time. It's been so wonderful to talk to you. The last time we met, we were friendly with each other, and I'd written one of those tasks for you, which was the back referencing task, and explain what we needed. And so it was only a small part I helped to contribute, but it does make me happy that I was able to do something. But I do appreciate your time. Maybe we can come back next week and you can tell me some stuff about what in the future. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.